for the first time in a very long time, we have technical military teams from both Ukraine and Russia meeting in a forum that we'll also be involved with, and our experts, Steve Woodcock and Jared Kushner will also be attending for part of that, and we think that's important. And look, I don't want to say talks alone are progress, but it's good that there's engagement going on. I would also caution everyone that on things like this, because there's a lot of sensitivities involved in it, progress is probably not going to be known, even via leaks, until we really have a breakthrough. You look at the checklist of open items that existed at this time last year and the checklist of open items that remain now in terms of reaching a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, that list has been substantially diminished. That's the good news. The bad news is that the items that remain are the most difficult ones. And meanwhile, the war continues. This war will end at some point, and when it does, Ukraine needs to be able to harness all of the resources of their country to be able to rebuild it. Ukraine has tremendous economic potential. It is a country that could probably double its GDP in the next decade with the right economic moves, and we certainly think that is a part of an enduring peace.
Our next question will be from Elizabeth Hagedorn from All Monitor.
Secretary Rubio, can you confirm the format and location of Friday's talks with Iran and clarify, given that Iran refuses to negotiate its missile program and insists on a right to enrich uranium, is the U.S. open to a compromise if that means reaching a deal to avoid military action? And separately, if I may, how exactly do these negotiations advance President Trump's repeated pledges to help the Iranian protesters, many of whom are likely to see these nuclear talks as legitimizing the very government that violently massacred its own people?
Well, let me first say, just on the logistics, at the end, let me back up and say from a big picture perspective, I think it's pretty clear right now, President Trump is willing to talk to and meet with and engage with anyone in the world. I mean, that we don't view meetings as a concession. We don't view meetings as even legitimization. It is our willingness to sit and listen and talk to anyone, any adversary, any ally, obviously, but anyone around the world. And so the president's always been open to that. He showed that in the first administration, and he's showing it again now. And so I think if there's an opportunity to engage directly with counterparts in the Iranian regime, the United States would be open to that, and that's what we're open to. We thought we had an established forum that had been agreed to. In Turkey, it was put together by a number of partners who wanted to attend and be a part of it. I saw conflicting reports yesterday from the Iranian side saying that they had not agreed to that. So that's still being worked through. At the end of the day, the United States is prepared to engage and has always been prepared to engage with Iran. As far as the topic of those discussions and what the agenda needs to be, look, I think in order for talks to actually lead to something meaningful, they will have to include certain things. And that includes the range of their ballistic missiles. That includes their sponsorship of terrorist organizations across the region. That includes the nuclear program, and that includes the treatment of their own people. The fundamental problem Iran faces and the regime faces right now is that what people are on the streets complaining about, this regime cannot address. They cannot address it because it's economic. Those problems remain. And one of the reasons why the Iranian regime cannot provide the people of Iran the quality of life that they deserve is because they're spending all their money, they're spending all their resources of what is a rich country sponsoring terrorism, sponsoring all these proxy groups around the world, exporting, as they call it, their revolution. But I remind everybody what I've been saying through my entire career in public service. I said it in my hearing when I was asking for confirmation through the Senate. The Iranian people and the Iranian regime are very unalike. In essence, what the Iranian people want, this is a culture with a deep history. These are people that are the leadership of Iran at the clerical level does not reflect the people of Iran. I know of no other country where there's a bigger difference between the people that lead the country and the people who live there. And so our hope resides in that. As far as the president's views on the way protesters were treated, he was very clear about it. And as you saw, part of what the president said publicly prevented mass executions that were being planned and were on the precipice of. And obviously beyond that, the president retains a number of options to how he responds to that and future events. But as far as the talks are concerned, I think the Iranians had agreed to a certain format. For whatever reason, it's changed in their system or what have you. We'll see if we can get back to the right place. But the United States is prepared to meet with them. I think it was scheduled for Friday. Steve is ready to go. He'll be prepared for that. If the Iranians want to meet, we're ready. They've expressed an interest in meeting and talking. If they change their mind, we're fine with that too. We prefer to meet and talk. I'm not sure you can reach a deal with these guys, but we're going to try to find out. We don't see there's any harm in trying to figure out there's something that can be done. This is a president that always prefers a peaceful outcome to any conflict or any challenge.
The start of the new year has brought no peace or even respite to Ukraine, but renewed fighting and devastation. Large-scale aerial assaults by the Russian Federation against civilians and civilian infrastructure across the country have resulted in horrific levels of destruction and suffering. As temperatures plummet far below freezing, the Russian Federation has intensified its systematic attacks targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The strikes have killed and injured scores of civilians and deprived millions of Ukrainians of electricity, heating, and water for prolonged periods. The impact of these attacks is felt hardest by the most vulnerable, the elderly, children, and persons with limited mobility. They follow a well-established and deeply troubling pattern. Attacks escalate when weather conditions worsen and people's need for heating becomes most acute. In one of the most recent large-scale barrages overnight between 8 and 9 January, the Russian Federation reportedly launched 242 drones and 36 missiles against Ukraine. In Kyiv, at least 4 people were reportedly killed and 25 others injured. A paramedic rushing to provide emergency medical care was among those killed, reportedly by a so-called double-tap strike. Energy facilities and multiple residential buildings were damaged, leaving nearly half of the city and hundreds of thousands of residents without heating. The embassy of Qatar was also damaged. That same day, areas in the western Lviv region near the Polish border were reportedly targeted by a Russian intermediate-range ballistic missile, the so-called Oreshnik. This would be the second time the potentially devastating weapon has been fired at Ukraine since 2024. The Oreshnik system is believed to be capable of carrying nuclear weapons, which has heightened concern over its deployment. According to Ukrainian authorities, the strike damaged gas distribution pipelines, raising additional concerns about risks to critical civilian infrastructure. Also on 8 January, 2 foreign-flagged civilian vessels were hit by Russian drones in the Odessa region. On 17 January, Russian strikes in the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions reportedly left more than 1 million people without running water or heating. In Kryvyi Rih, 17 people, including children, were reportedly injured when missiles and drones hit residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure. And in the Odessa region, 2 people were reportedly killed and 8 others injured in an attack on 2 ports. Cooking oil storage facilities and containers were damaged. Odessa was hit again yesterday. This was the latest in a highly concerning escalation of strikes targeting Ukraine's port infrastructure and commercial shipping. In recent weeks, civilian casualties and extensive damage to critical infrastructure have also been reported in Kherson, Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Sumy regions. In total, since the start of the Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has verified that at least 14,999 civilians have been killed, including 763 children, and 40,601 civilians injured, including 2,486 children. The actual figures are likely higher. OHCHR's monitoring mission in Ukraine has just reported that 2025 was the deadliest year for civilians since 2022. Mr. President, inside the Russian Federation, local authorities continue to report civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure resulting from alleged Ukrainian strikes. We are seeing additional reports of escalating cross-border attacks on Russia's oil and energy infrastructure, some of which reportedly resulted in civilian casualties and damage to civilian and residential facilities. In Belgorod Oblast, local authorities reported that 600,000 residents were left without electricity, heating, and water after Ukrainian strike on 9 January. The authorities also reported the use of drones targeting Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod regions on 10 January, which left one person killed and at least 3 other people injured. Due to lack of access and limited public information, the United Nations is not in a position to verify these reports. Mr. President, we reiterate the Secretary General's strong condemnation of all attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure. Such attacks violate international humanitarian law. No matter where they occur, they are unacceptable, unjustifiable, and must stop immediately. Mr. President, as hostilities intensify, the situation at Ukraine's nuclear sites remains extremely precarious. On the night of 3 January, Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia, temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation, lost power from one of its high-voltage lines due to hostilities. Over the past week, the team of the International Atomic Energy Agency at the site has reported a significant increase in military activity in the areas surrounding the plant, including explosions heard close to the facility. These events are extremely alarming. The IAEA continues its efforts to establish temporary ceasefire zones in the areas around the plant to allow for essential repair work to ensure its safe and secure functioning. We urge both the Russian Federation and Ukraine to engage constructively with the IAEA and to immediately cease any military activities near the plant in order to reduce the risk of a catastrophic accident. Mr. President, in just over a month, we will mark 4 years since the start of the Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war has brought untold suffering to the Ukrainian people, killed an unimaginable number of young men of both countries, caused global economic dislocation, and sown instability in the region and beyond. The damage it has done to the international system is still being measured. The war should never have started, and it must stop. We commend the efforts of the United States and all others concerned who are working towards peace. We urge all involved to sustain this vital work, including through concrete steps to de-escalate, stop the ongoing attacks impacting civilians in Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and establish clear parameters to end this devastating conflict. We reaffirm the Secretary General's repeated calls for an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire as a first step towards a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace grounded in respect for international law and the principles of the United Nations Charter. Any peace in Ukraine must fully uphold the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. The United Nations remains ready to support all meaningful efforts toward this end. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just days ago, U.S. diplomats met with EU and Ukrainian counterparts to advance negotiations toward a lasting peace. Thanks to the leadership of President Trump, we are closer to a deal now than at any point since the war began. Despite this, Russia launched more attacks on Ukraine, including its launch of its nuclear-capable Orishnik ballistic missile, targeting an area of Ukraine close to the border with Poland and NATO. This constitutes another dangerous and inexplicable escalation of this war, even as the United States is urgently working with Kyiv, other partners, and Moscow to end the war through a negotiated settlement. At a moment of tremendous potential, due only to President Trump's unparalleled commitment to peace around the world, both sides should be seeking ways to de-escalate. Yet Russia's action risks expanding and intensifying the war. From the start, President Trump has decried the carnage of this conflict. Horribly, we have to continue to deplore the staggering number of casualties, service members and civilians, men, women, and children. We condemn Russia's continuing and intensifying attacks on Ukraine's energy facilities and other civilian infrastructure. These attacks make a mockery of the cause of peace, a cause of paramount importance to the world and to President Trump. I would like to remind the Russian Federation of its vote in favor of Security Council Resolution 2774 nearly 1 year ago. That resolution called for a swift end to the conflict and lasting peace. It would be nice if Russia matched their words with deeds. In the spirit of that resolution, Russia, Ukraine, and Europe must pursue peace seriously and bring this nightmare to an end. Thank you.